For 3 years, I drove my mother to every chemotherapy appointment at the Juravinsky Cancer Center. For 3 years, I managed her prescriptions, her insurance paperwork, her OHIP forms, her home care schedules. For 3 years, I put my career on hold, let my apartment lease lapse, moved back into the house I grew up in on Elmwood Crescent, and watched my social life quietly disappear. My brother visited 4 times. Maybe 5. I stopped counting after a while, because counting made it hurt more. When the estate lawyer opened my mother's will in that small office on King Street West, everything— the house, the RRSPs, the investment accounts, the lake cottage in Muskoka— went to him. The room went completely still. Everyone looked at me. My aunt, my mother's oldest friend from her Kitchener days, the lawyer himself. They all waited for me to fall apart. Instead, I reached into the pocket of my coat and placed a sealed envelope on the table. That's when my brother's expression changed. My name is Naomi, and I was 38 years old when I learned that the people who show up don't always show up in the ways you expect them to. My mother's diagnosis came on a Thursday in November. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 3. I remember sitting in the parking garage of Hamilton General afterward. My hands still on the steering wheel, not crying yet, just staring at the concrete pillar in front of me, with a yellow stripe painted around its base. My mother was in the passenger seat. She was the one who reached over and turned on the heat. "We'll figure it out," she said. That was her way. She never fell apart in front of you. She just quietly started planning. My brother, he lives out in Kelowna, has lived there since he finished school, called that evening. He was sympathetic. He said the right things. He said he'd fly in as soon as he could get time off work. He said he'd look into flights. He said he was thinking of us constantly. He came for Christmas that year. He stayed 5 days, took a lot of photos with my mother, and then flew back to his life in British Columbia. I stayed. I'm not saying that to make him look bad. I'm saying it because it's what happened. And for a long time, I thought everyone already understood that. I thought it was visible. I thought the people who mattered could see it. The twice-weekly drives to Juravinsky. The Tuesday morning pharmacy runs. The nights I slept on the pull-out couch in the living room, because my mother was afraid to be alone when she felt sick after a treatment. I thought all of it was obvious, the way certain things just are. It turned out, not everyone was watching the same things I was. The first year was the hardest in a practical sense. Getting the treatment schedule organized, figuring out the home care system, learning what provincial supports were available, and which ones required 3 weeks of back and forth with Service Ontario to actually access. My mother qualified for home care through the LHIN, 4 hours a week, which sounds like a lot until you realize what 4 hours a week actually looks like when someone can't drive, can't cook on difficult days, needs help managing medications that interact in complicated ways. I took a leave from my job at the marketing firm, unpaid, initially, and then I transitioned to part-time contract work that I fit around my mother's appointments. I was good at my job, and I was fortunate enough that a few clients stayed with me through the shift. But I watched promotions go to colleagues who were available in the ways I wasn't anymore. I watched the career trajectory I'd spent my 30s building bend sideways and then stop moving forward altogether. I told myself it was temporary. My brother called every Sunday evening. He was consistent about that. I'll give him that. He asked how she was doing, and I gave him honest updates, and he said the right things. That it sounded hard, that he didn't know how I managed, that she was lucky to have me nearby. He meant it. I believe he meant it. But there is a very long distance between meaning something and doing something. And that distance is the width of a continent and 3 time zones. In the second year, things got harder in a different way. The cancer responded to treatment, but then it didn't. And there was a period of about 4 months in the spring and summer when nobody was quite sure which direction things were going. My mother was tired in a bone-deep way that was difficult to describe. She wasn't herself in small moments. She'd forget the middle of a sentence. Or she'd repeat something she'd just said. Or she'd get frustrated about things that normally wouldn't have bothered her. and then feel embarrassed about the frustration. I learned to move through those moments without making them significant. I learned to just keep going. My brother came in July of that second year. He stayed a long weekend. He took her for ice cream one afternoon and sent me a photo of the two of them in front of a Dairy Queen on Queenston Road, my mother looking thin but smiling. It was a good visit. I don't want to take that away from it. But I was there when she was sick at 3 a.m, and I was there on a Tuesday when the pharmacy gave us the wrong dosage, and I had to spend 2 hours on the phone sorting it out. And I was there on the Wednesday. She sat at the kitchen table and cried because she was frightened, and I just sat with her and let her be frightened. Because sometimes that's the only thing you can do. He wasn't there for those parts. Somewhere in the third year, I stopped waiting for things to get easier and just accepted that this was what my life looked like now. Not with bitterness, at least. I tried not to let it be bitterness. More with a kind of settling, a recalibration. This is what I'm doing. This is who I am right now. I made a choice, and choices have shapes, and this is the shape of mine. What I did not let myself think about, because thinking about it felt mercenary and small, was what would happen when it was over. I did not think about the house on Elmwood Crescent, where I had been living for nearly 3 years by then. I did not think about the Muskoka cottage, where we had spent every August of my childhood. Where my mother had told me once that she hoped it would always stay in the family. I did not think about the investment accounts, or the RRSPs. I told myself those things didn't matter, that I was here because I loved her, and that was the only reason that was worth being here for. And I believed that. I genuinely believed it. But if I'm being honest, and this whole story requires honesty, there was something in the back of my mind that assumed things would make sense in the end, that the shape of what I had done would be reflected somehow in what came next. Not as payment, not transactionally, just as a kind of logic. People see what you do. They account for it. That's how things are supposed to work. My mother passed away on a Sunday morning in late September. I was there. I had made coffee and was sitting in the armchair by the window, and she just stopped breathing, very quietly, the way she had lived. Without drama, without performance. My brother arrived 2 days later for the funeral. He cried at the service in a way that seemed genuine. He helped carry the casket. Afterward, at the reception at the house, he moved through the rooms greeting people, and I watched him do it, and I thought, he looks like he belongs here. He looks like he was here all along. 3 weeks after the funeral, we sat in an office downtown for the reading of the will. My aunt was there. My mother's longtime friend from Kitchener was there. The estate lawyer, a careful, quiet man in a gray suit, sat at the head of the table with the documents arranged in front of him. My brother came in slightly late, still in his coat. He sat down across from me and gave me a small nod. The lawyer put on his glasses and began to read. My mother had left everything to my brother, the house, the cottage, the RRSPs and investment accounts. A small TFSA that I hadn't even known about. Everything that existed in her estate was listed under his name, one line after another. Each one landing in the room, like something dropped from a height. I sat very still. I was aware of my aunt looking at me from across the table. I was aware of the lawyer's voice continuing, professionally neutral. And of my brother's posture. He'd straightened slightly when his name started appearing, and I noticed he wasn't quite meeting my eyes. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not say anything at all. When the lawyer finished reading and closed the folder, the silence in the room was the kind that happens when people are waiting for something to break. I reached into my coat pocket and placed a sealed envelope on the table. Before we conclude, I said, my mother asked me to give this to the lawyer after the will was read. My brother finally looked at me. What is that? I looked at the lawyer. She gave it to me last spring. She said you'd know what to do with it. The lawyer looked at the envelope, then at me, then at the envelope again. On the front, in my mother's handwriting, small and precise, the same handwriting that had written my name on birthday cards for 38 years. It said, to be opened only after the estate has been read aloud. He broke the seal, For a moment, the only sound in the room was the paper unfolding. Then he began to read. If you are reading this, then my children are together in the same room, which is more than I could always manage when I was alive. There was a faint, involuntary sound from my aunt. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cry. The lawyer continued. To my daughter, Naomi, I need you to understand something before anything else. What I am about to say is not a reflection of what your sacrifice was worth. I know what you gave. I knew it every single day. My throat closed. The lawyer read on. You drove me to appointments on mornings when you had to be somewhere else. You sat in hospital waiting rooms with your laptop open, working, because you couldn't afford not to work, and you couldn't leave me there alone. You slept on my pull-out couch more nights than either of us kept track of. You never complained. You never made me feel like a burden, even when I know I was one. Across the table, my brother had gone very quiet. To my son, I love you. I have always loved you, and this letter is not meant to shame you. But there are things that need to be said, and I did not have the courage to say them while I was alive, so I am saying them now. He shifted in his seat. Being far away is a reason. It is not an excuse. There are phone calls that don't require a plane ticket. There are nights when someone needs to hear a voice, and it does not have to be an in-person voice. Distance explains some things. It does not explain everything. Nobody in the room moved. The lawyer turned the page and his expression shifted. A small but visible change, the kind that happens when a professional encounters something they weren't expecting. The estate I have left in my will represents my assets as filed through probate, he read. It is not the entirety of what I have. A ripple went through the room. 8 years ago, I established a discretionary trust through a separate legal instrument. I did this quietly, with the help of my own lawyer, and I chose not to mention it to either of my children. The trust was set up to sit outside my estate and therefore outside the probate process. It contains the Muskoka property, certain private investments, and a sum of money that I accumulated over many years and did not include in my registered accounts. My aunt made a sound. My brother's head came up. The sole beneficiary and trustee of this trust is my daughter, Naomi. The room did not explode exactly. It was more like a pressure releasing. Everyone inhaling at once, chairs shifting, the quality of the silence changing completely. My brother stared at me. I looked at the table. The lawyer continued reading. I chose this structure deliberately. The estate in the will is straightforward to administer. It requires no special judgment, no stewardship, no particular understanding of what it means to manage something over time. I left it the way I did because I believed your brother could use the security, and because I knew he would manage it responsibly in a financial sense. But the trust requires something different. The trust requires the kind of judgment that comes from showing up when it's difficult, from learning to manage complicated things under pressure, from knowing what matters and what doesn't. I have watched Naomi develop that judgment for 3 years. I trust her with it in a way that I cannot explain in a legal document, but that I know to be true. I was crying by then. I hadn't decided to cry. It just happened, quietly, without any drama, which I suppose was fitting. The letter went on for one more paragraph. My hope is that my children will understand this not as a verdict but as an honest accounting. I love you both. I see you both clearly, and I always did. What I saw was different, and I am no longer able to pretend otherwise. Naomi. The cottage is yours, the dock, the canoe, the August light on the water. All of it is yours. Please go there. Please let it still be the family it was. The lawyer set down the letter. No one spoke for a long time. Then my brother looked at me across the table, and I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to describe what I saw as guilt or shame or anger. It wasn't exactly any of those things. It was something more complicated. Something that looked like a person who had been comfortable with a story about themselves for a very long time, and was now sitting across from evidence that the story wasn't entirely true. Did you know? He said. No, I said. I had no idea. He nodded slowly. He looked down at the table. I should have come more, he said, And the simplicity of it, no excuses, no qualifications, was the last thing I expected from him. It cracked something open a little. Yeah, I said, you should have. He nodded again. We didn't say anything else for a while. Later, after everyone had filed out of the office, and the lawyer had given me the trust documents in a large manila envelope that I held against my chest like something fragile. My brother and I stood on the sidewalk outside. October in Hamilton, cold, gray sky, the smell of something burning somewhere a few blocks away. I'm not going to fight this, he said. I know you're not, I said. He put his hands in his coat pockets. He looked like he was about to say something that required more words than he currently had access to. After a moment, he just said, "She saw everything, didn't she?" "She always did," I said. "That was the thing about her." He flew back to Kelowna 2 days later. We've spoken a few times since then. The conversations are careful, deliberate, like two people who have agreed to try, without quite knowing yet how to try. I think it's real. I think he meant what he said on the sidewalk. Whether meaning something translates into doing something differently is a question that only time will answer. And I have learned, over the past 3 years, that I am better at waiting than I used to be. I drove out to the cottage in November, alone, which I know sounds bleak but wasn't. I unlocked the door with the same key that had hung on the hook in my mother's kitchen for as long as I could remember. I walked through the rooms that smelled like cedar and old blankets, and the particular mustiness of a building closed up for winter. I stood on the dock in my coat, the lake completely still, the birch trees on the far shore bare and white against the gray water. I didn't feel triumphant. That's what people expect, I think, that the person who was vindicated walks away feeling like they've won something. But winning wasn't the point. It was never the point. The point was that she knew. The point was that all those Tuesday mornings and 3 a.m. nights and pharmacy phone calls and Sunday afternoons reorganizing pill organizers on the kitchen counter, she had seen every single one of them. She had been paying attention in her quiet, precise, unfussy way, the same way she had always paid attention to everything. And she had spent 8 years preparing a way to say so. I stood on the dock until my hands got too cold to stay. Then I went back inside and put the kettle on. Some things you inherit because someone wrote them down in a legal document. Some things you inherit because you were present for them, year after year, in the ordinary accumulation of ordinary days. My brother inherited money and a house, and the comfortable story that distance had made him absent, not choice. What my mother left me was harder to name on a form, and worth considerably more.